Hello everyone, my name is Emmy and I am from Norwest Co-op Community Health. I'm one of the counselors of Immigrant Women's Counseling Services. November is Domestic Violence Awareness Month in Canada, and to help raise awareness and prevent family violence, our team is organizing an info series focusing on family violence that you can watch from our Facebook page. Please don't forget to like and share a Women's Place page on Instagram. Today, it is really my honor. Thank you again, Miss Lisa. I'm really thankful that you agreed to this interview. She is our go-to person if we have some questions or clarifications about court order of protections. And without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce Miss Lisa Sutton, Manager of Victim Witness Assistance Program. Hello, Miss Lisa.
Hello, thank you very much for having me.
Oh, thank you for agreeing to this interview. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And
absolutely, it's my honor.
Facebook page. So today, Ms. Lisa, we are here to discuss a little bit about your role and the services that you offer for women in an abusive relationship.
So I'm with Manitoba Justice Victim Services, and we have a general role in terms of the court process. In terms of victim services role in general, we have a domestic violence unit, we have the compensation for victims of crime program, we have the Victims Bill of Rights and child victim unit. And so those units all work together to provide people information about their rights if they're going through a court process as a victim or a witness, and their responsibilities. And our services are free of charge. And then in terms specifically of women or people who are experiencing domestic violence, we have a domestic violence support services, which throughout the province, we are there to support women who have called police and charges have been laid, called police or RCMP and charges have been laid. And we support women with safety planning. If they're eligible for compensation, we refer them to resources, that kind of thing. And in Winnipeg, we also have a service where if police have been called but no charges have been laid, we will reach out and support people in that situation as well.
Oh, wow, it's really a range and variety of services that you provide. It's really good. So you mentioned about the safety planning, and we do have a lot of women that we are helping in our program, the family violence program, that they are needing protection orders. Do you want to talk a little bit more of protection order and how they can apply for PO or protection order during this time where the pandemic is really getting out of hand?
Right. So usually back in what I refer to normal times, it used to be that best practice was that somebody would come to the courthouse, excuse me, and they would apply in person at the courthouse, and then they would fill out an application and some written evidence, and then they would attend a hearing with a judicial justice of the peace. So that is still theoretically best practice, if you can call it that at this point. Certainly that is still an option. If people aren't quite sure about coming to the courthouse, then they certainly can call the general line, ask to speak to a deputy registrar, and get information about mailing in an application at this point. So people are able to do that. And then people are able to apply with a peace officer, a lawyer, or a protection order designate. And a protection order designate is staff, people like yourself who are working in community agencies who have extra training in protection orders and are able to help people apply by phone.
So, Ms. Lisa, you mentioned that they can mail in the forms that we are helping our clients to fill out?
Yes, at this point, I actually just learned about this. So people are being, there is a process now where people can mail in their forms. I would say phone and speak to somebody first to find out that your submitting the right thing, you have the full application, that kind of thing. If there are any fees involved, so a protection order, applying for a protection order itself is free, but doing anything else may involve a fee. So it's important to make sure you're calling and getting that information.
Do you have the number with you that our clients or women can call if they want to ask certain questions about that?
Is it okay if I get it to you and then maybe you can post it?
Of course, we can put it on our Facebook page as well.
Excellent, I'll do that.
It's really good to know that they can mail in and then they can ask questions about the steps that they can do in order to apply for protection order, because a lot of people might be thinking that courthouse is closed because of our pandemic. So it's good that there are other options as well.
That's right. So the courthouses are still open, but there are other options.
So what about the teleconferences? How does that work, Ms. Lisa?
Okay. So a teleconference is when somebody applies for a protection order, they usually give evidence in writing. That's part of the application process. And then they also give evidence verbally in front of a judicial justice of the peace. And often that's done in person at the courthouse. But for some people, so for instance, in rural areas or during a pandemic or something, there are options for giving the verbal evidence via a teleconference. And so a person would need to, the only people who are available, who are allowed to set up a teleconference are peace officers, lawyers, and protection order designates. Again, those community staff with the extra training. And so if somebody has one of those people available, the protection order designate, lawyer, or peace officer is able to set up that teleconference hearing with a judicial justice of the peace.
Okay, so that's really a helpful information. So there's another options that we can consider and see if our client is really in an immediate danger. We can try doing the teleconferences as well.
Right, that's right.
So if, for example, Miss Lisa, if one of our women doesn't fit for protection order criteria, is there any other court orders that they can do or apply?
There is actually. So if somebody isn't eligible for a protection order, which might be a variety of reasons, if somebody isn't eligible for a protection order, they can also apply for what's called a prevention order. A prevention order is basically the same as a protection order, except that a prevention order takes a little bit longer and both people have notice of the hearing. So with a protection order, because it's an emergency order, if a person, say, applies by telephone or they go in person and they have a hearing and a judicial justice of the peace grants the protection order today, the other person, so what we call the respondent, the person who's responding to the protection order, the other person doesn't know that any of this is going on. So their side of the story, their evidence hasn't been heard, okay? And so the prevention order takes a little bit longer, but both sides of the stories are heard. Both parties get notice. And with a prevention order, you can also get quite a few more conditions. So a protection order, you can get conditions like the respondent can't be anywhere near the applicant, can't go to the applicant's home, school, work, place of worship, those kinds of things, can't contact the applicant. A prevention order can have those conditions plus a few more. So it's not necessarily for emergencies. A prevention order is not necessarily for emergencies. It takes longer and you can have more conditions. And then there is also a peace bond. So to apply for a protection order or a peace bond is free. And with a peace bond, again, you can go to the courthouse and fill out a simple form, or you can call the courthouse and mail in your application. A peace bond takes a couple of weeks to a couple of months. and it lasts for a year if granted. So there are other options for sure. And the Manitoba Justice Victim Services website has fact sheets on all the different court orders and one more specifically on protection orders as well, along with a whole bunch of other resources.
So peace bond also is another option for family that, let's say, it's not an intimate partner violence, but let's say a brother-in-law and a sister-in-law kind of thing, right? That is the good option for them.
That's right. A peace bond is kind of for anybody else. A protection order and a prevention order deals with domestic violence and stalking specifically. A peace bond is basically for anyone else. There's no domestic violence, maybe there's no stalking, but people say there's coworkers or there's neighbors or something like that, or people who don't fit into that domestic violence sort of relationship. Then the peace bond might be an option.
Okay, so that's really great information. So, Miss Lisa, do you want to also talk about, because we are seeing women as well that after they got or acquired protection order, some of their spouses are trying to move it or remove it or set it aside. Do you want to talk about the process and what will be the implication of it to our women or to the children?
Sure. So the protection order, as I said, only the applicant gets to give their side of the story, give their evidence. And so the what's called the set-aside hearing is basically like an appeal process for the respondent. So meaning that the respondent finds out about the protection order, there's conditions that the respondent can't contact the applicant, and the respondent might say, you know what, I don't think this is fair, I don't think this should be granted, whatever. And so they're allowed to kind of give their side of the story in what's called a set-aside process. And so the respondent would need to apply for a set-aside, meaning set aside or cancel the protection order. And so what happens is the respondent has 20 days to apply for that set aside after being served, after knowing about the protection order. They have 20 days, although that can be longer if a judge decides. But within that first 20 days, they are able to go to the courthouse or phone in and apply to have the protection order set aside. And so what happens is a hearing date will be set and the applicant, your client, will get notice of that hearing. And so it used to be that those hearings were done in person at the courthouse, and now those are all being done by phone. And so what will happen is if the respondent applies for the set aside or cancellation, basically, the applicant, your client, will get a notice of the hearing and will get information about where and when to phone in. And then at that hearing, there can be 4 possible outcomes. A judge can decide to keep the protection order as is. A judge can decide to set aside or cancel the protection order completely. A judge can decide to change the protection order, so it will stay in place, but maybe a change is made to one of the conditions, or a judge will decide that they're not able to make a decision that day and set a date for another hearing. So those are the 4 possible outcomes. And so we do strongly encourage applicants to attend right now by phone, so hopefully that's easier. We do strongly encourage applicants to attend that set-aside hearing.
All right. Okay. Well, that's a great information. I also want to share for all our listeners or to those who watch our info series today. Our office, like a woman's place, we also have a lawyer that can help you answer some questions about the steps that you need to do or how is it looks like. So you can just also give us a call to have that legal consult for free. So thank you so much for that information, Miss Lisa. It's really helpful and informative to the services that you guys provided and to the women that we serve. So it's really good information for them to know the other options that they can get if they need safety, right?
Right.
Is there anything else that you think people might need to know about protection orders or any other things?
Okay. About protection orders specifically, there's two things that I really like people to be aware of. Number one is that a protection order ultimately is a piece of paper. It means that a person can be charged with, breaching a court order, right? Going against a court order. But ultimately, it's a piece of paper. And so there are people who maybe don't respect court orders or don't follow them for whatever reason. And so I really want to encourage people that your safety plan is your best bet. Even if you have a protection order, you still need to have some sort of safety plan. The other thing that people need to be aware of with protection orders is that if it's granted, it is valid for 3 years. And so if there is a possibility that maybe you might want to resume a relationship with the person, or maybe you share children together and there's, maybe you see that person for whatever reason, and sometimes it's safe and sometimes it's not. Really think about whether or not you are able to stay away from that person for 3 years, because to cancel a protection order is a long process and it costs money. So it's something to really be aware of when you're applying for a protection order.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. And also, you mentioned earlier in the beginning of our conversation that we have a pod, like protection order designate, that you guys are training. And just to let other people know that our organization is one of the pod, like all of our counselors from our family violence team at Norwest Co-op Community Health, we are all trained as protection order designates. So if you guys need help applying for protection order and discuss more about safety planning, you can always call us or message to our Facebook page and we can help you on that. Thank you so much, Ms. Lisa. Is there any message of hope for our survivors of family violence that you want to share?
I think this is the hardest piece. I think there's so much to say and to fit it into, but I want to say, there is help out there. If you are out of the relationship, if you are in the relationship, we see you, we're here for you. We're here to support. Sometimes asking for that help can be the hardest thing to do, but we know you are so strong and you are a survivor because you've done it to this point. And so when you ask for help, there is no shame in that. Please do, because there are resources out there.
Thank you. That's really,
Yes.
really inspiring. And also for the women, the immigrant women that we serve, or the population that we serve, we have interpreters when they are applying for protection order, right? The
Yes,
Department of Justice provided an interpreter so it's easy for women to tell their story or, explain what's going on in the house, right, Ms. Lisa?
Yes, absolutely.
Forgot to mention that.
Yeah, yes, Victim Services is happy to provide interpreters if people are applying or want information about protection orders. So we know that it's a hard process and that sometimes there are barriers to that, and we want to work with people to help them get over those barriers. And so one of them is providing interpreters when needed.
Yes, thank you. And also before we end, Ms. Lisa, I'm so excited to ask you questions. I forgot to introduce what my program is. So
Okay.
I'm going to talk a little bit about Immigrant Women's Counseling Services. It's one of the family violence program of Norwest Co-op Community Health. So it's a women's place, and then our legal services, our Immigrant Women's Counseling Services, and our support workers. So the Immigrant Women's Counseling Services, we provide confidential counseling and support to newcomer and immigrant women. So regardless whether they are a newcomer or they've been in Canada for so long, or if they are Canadian citizens, and if they are having some marital or family issues or family violence in the home, we provide counseling and support focusing on domestic violence, trauma, and abuse. And we also discuss very thorough about the safety planning and the protection orders as well. And we also provide information on women's rights, support group like anger management or healthy relationships, stress management. So there's a lot of variety of support groups that we offer. And we refer to legal consult to our in-house lawyers, and we help women apply for legal aid. We're referring them to employment and income assistance, or finding a housing if they are ready to leave the relationship. And we also have access to interpreter services. So those are the services that we provide for immigrant women. And we also have different programs that are for non-immigrant women as well. Again, thank you so much, Miss Lisa.
You are so welcome. Thank you very much again. I'm thrilled to be able to do this. I'm honored that you asked me.
Oh, thank you again. Bye.
Okay. Bye. Take care.